right, hereby I open this academic ceremony in which Chelsea Phillips will defend the academic thesis, Service Robots in the Wild, the impact of the robotic-human intrusion challenge on FLE well-being. May I invite you, Chelsea, to present the summary of your findings and conclusions of your thesis. Thank you.
Thank you. Dear Pro-Rector, members of the opposition, colleagues, family and friends, today I wish to present a summary of my PhD thesis, Service Robots in the Wild, the impact of the Robotic-Human Intrusion Challenge on frontline employee well-being. Now, before I get into my findings, I wish to share a personal story about the first time I witnessed a service robot in the wild. I happened to be seated at Dadawan, which I'm sure many of you recognize, when I was at their Kerkrade location that employs various social robots. I happened to be amazed at how fast these robots were moving about the room, how excited customers were to receive their meal, when my eyes cast over to the preparation area. Here, frontline employees would distribute the dishes from the kitchen onto these robots to be sent about the restaurant. Here, I caught my attention to a particular waitress who simply wanted to pass through this area. However, given the narrow space, there was a service robot in her way. No matter which way she turned, the robot seemed to provide a challenge for her, and she grew increasingly frustrated, to the point where she kicked the robot and shoved it aside and proceeded to make her way to the customers. Unfortunately for her, the trouble was not over. Approaching a customer table, she is interrupted yet again by a different service robot. Now, while a comical story, this echoes a larger problem at hand. Service robots can be used to address staff shortages by managers, yet these same service robots affect the employees who must ultimately work with them. Now, considering this, I found it important to explore how service robots perform in the wild and how this affects the people who must ultimately work with them. And through this solution, we may be able to design an effective robotic-human future together. Now, with any PhD, I first had to ascertain what we currently know about service robots in various service environments, and I conducted a systematic literature review. Here, I really sought to understand, for those operating in service environments, being the customer, employee, and manager, how service robots affected their well-being. What I found was that all individuals are indeed affected, but however, the employee is most affected. More so, the employee is affected with their relationship with the customer, something I term as the intrusion challenge. The intrusion challenge is exactly what it sounds like. It is when a service robot interrupts or simply intrudes upon the long-standing relationship held between the employee and customer. Here, employees must also have to compensate for limitations in service robot performance, and as a result, employee well-being is impacted. Now, what is important to know is that this is developed based on prior literature, which in recent years hasn't been able to access service robots in the wild. Now, this begs the question, is this intrusion challenge something we should actually fear? And that is what I sought to find out. I conducted 2 field studies, one in the aged care setting and one in hospitality, to uncover what it is like to witness service robots in the wild. Following this, I conceptualized the Service Robot Innovation Canvas to really demonstrate how we can effectively integrate service robots into real businesses. And without delay, I encourage you to step into the wild with me. My first study was aged care. And if we reflect on aged care in general and the people who work there, being the care staff, we know that they often describe having a calling to their career choice. They engage in additional vocational training to be able to form their role, and their expertise is learned and enhanced through experience. Unfortunately, as with most healthcare sectors, burnout is incredibly common, and in the aged care setting, it is incredibly stressful and emotionally burdening for care staff as they have to care for people who are cognitively declining. Now, looking at that long-standing relationship between the care staff and the resident, what we know is that that connection is really vital. It's incredibly important for the care staff to know their residents' past experiences, preferences, and personalities to provide effective person-centered care. Therefore, in my PhD, I sought to understand how might a service robot improve care staff well-being in light of increasingly staff burnout in this aged care setting. And obviously, I want to introduce you to this service robot. This is Hiro-chan. Now, Hero-Chan is known as a therapeutic healing device that seeks to comfort those experiencing dementia. And what Hero-Chan can do is, in response to being rocked, touched, and soothed, emit emotional baby noises. And these can be negative, positive, or neutral. And that's enough for now. And the purpose of this doll is to basically provide comfort to those experiencing dementia. And you will notice it had an abstract representation of a face in that it had none. And this is an intentional design choice by the manufacturers to limit any dissonance users might have between a baby with an expression, maybe portraying a positive emotion, yet emitting a negative one. So I conducted a pilot study in partnership with Savacrum, which is a comprehensive aged care provider within the region. I implemented 5 Hero-Chans to a mild to moderate dementia ward consisting of about 30 to 34 residents here. I conducted pre-interview workshop, semi-structured interviews with 20 care staff, including nurses, coordinators, and psychologists, and also witnessed firsthand Hero-Chan in action through on-site observations. Now, while it was introduced to the whole ward, there was one individual in particular that had resounding success. And this is someone I love to call Meep. Now, Meep was identified as the ideal candidate for Hero-Chan due to the stage of her dementia. Now, while the research team was busy setting up the most immaculate and perfect introduction from Hero-Chan to Meep, Meep had other plans. She happened to spot Hero-Chan in the caregiver's office, let herself in, and introduced herself to Hero-Chan then and there. She was later seen walking about the ward, showing off her newborn baby to fellow care staff and residents who were nearby. And it's this kind of organic interaction that really set forth a deeply moving project for everyone involved. Now, what I observed of Meep was that she truly believed Hero-Chan was her baby and would project this maternal narrative onto the robot. As a result, there was increased social interaction with care staff and also residents, and increased moments of lucidity. Additionally, Hero-Chan had a calming effect on Meep as she was focused on providing care for her baby. Now, the positive outcomes of Hero-Chan are quite obvious for Meep, but what does this mean for the people who ultimately care for her? Well, what I found is that Hero-Chan could provide really time-intensive emotional support. Indeed, Hero-Chan, being a plush social robot, cannot address the actual demands such as medical provision in their role. However, what Hero-Chan could do was afford care staff the time to perform other tasks. For instance, if a resident is restless, I don't have to keep going to their room to comfort them. The doll can take on that role and distract residents. It makes my job a bit easier. The second aggregate finding was that Hero-Chan could amplify the connection that care staff had with Meep by unlocking the person behind the dementia. Now, this could increase moments of meaningful connection for staff. During the interview process, staff often described having this innate desire to care for their residents, but limited time to do so due to the demands of their role throughout the sector. What Hero-Chan could do was amplify what moments they did have with the resident. Indeed, previously she never made contact with fellow residents while walking. Through the doll, she makes contact with staff. They often described interacting with Hero-Chan as a goosebump moment. Therefore, reflecting on the relationship between care staff and the resident, instead of observing the intrusion challenge or an interrupting of the connection between the care staff and residents, what I observed is that there was a deepening relationship between the resident and the care staff. Now I wish to describe my findings in the hospitality setting. When we look at people who work in hospitality, often they engage in very precarious working conditions. There's extensive emotional labour, and they experience exhaustion due to the demands of their role. As a result, there is poor staff retention throughout the industry. Now, looking at that relationship between the server and the customer, what we know is that it usually involves very courteous and hospitable interactions, and this is often prescribed by the organisation on how to do so. During my PhD, the opportunity arose to really leverage a long-standing partnership with a mature service robot hospitality setting. And here I really wanted to understand how do servers behave within this intrusion challenge and when they collaborate with service robots. And this setting was Data One, which I mentioned earlier. Now, Data One uses non-humanoid robots, as you can see here, where the servers simply place the food from the kitchen onto the robot and select where this robot should go. Customers then remove the food and beverages themselves and enjoy their meal. I consider this a very rare and also mature application of service robots in the wild. Now, this project involved 2 sequential studies with this restaurant chain. Data 1, at the time of data collection, had 5 locations throughout the Netherlands and in total 120 servers. For my first study, I conducted interviews with the Maastricht location of about 15 servers. And in the second study, I did a confirmatory survey with access to all of the locations and had 81 respondents. Now, the first aggregate finding is that often the servers would really evaluate the task at hand before using the service robot. It wasn't just something they did naturally. And often they determined if a robot themselves or another colleague would be best suited to perform that role. So my key takeaway from this was that they're very much in control of how they use technology and the resources at hand in their service environments. For Sarah, for instance, admitted that they very much plan in their head how they're going to reuse these resources. Now, my second finding is that, indeed, these servers did experience the intrusion challenge. They experienced a reduced level of interaction with their customers. However, this wasn't always a bad thing. They also used this intrusion challenge to simply avoid talking to customers if they perceived that it would be a difficult interaction or would impact their well-being. They often described it cheekily as using the robot as an escape. Therefore, while the intrusion challenge did certainly occur, service robots would actually use the robot to protect their well-being from difficult customers. Now, since I observed service robots in the wild, I anticipate that more businesses will follow suit and integrate service robots into their frontline environments. However, there is a lack of precedence of service robots in the wild, and it can be difficult for managers to ascertain how best to implement this new technology. Therefore, my line of questioning was, how can managers integrate service robots into their businesses? And through that, I conceptualized and present the Service Robot Innovation Canvas. Now, this is a canvas, much like the business model canvas, that is designed to show managers how to integrate service robots effectively into their businesses. Indeed, this is more of a blueprint for things to consider on how service robots can implicate their marketing strategies. Key considerations include the business capabilities, the customer service experience, and also the profit formula of the business. Indeed, there is an exciting future ahead, and through this canvas, we can really set themselves up for success. Now, my research sought to understand how service robots can perform in the wild and how this affects the people who must ultimately work beside them. And more so, I really had a line of questioning, is this intrusion challenge, where the connection between the employee and customer, something we should actually be afraid of? What I observed is that humans are more than capable of navigating this new frontier than we had previously given them credit. In fact, these employees will use the service robot to enhance the social world around them. Indeed, we need not fear the day we encounter a service robot when stepping into the wild. Thank you.
Thank you, dear candidate. Very clear presentation. We start the opposition, and the opposition will be opened with Professor Dr. Lemming, Joost Lemming, Professor of Marketing and Service Innovation of Maastricht University.
Thank you, Pro-Rector. Dear candidate, it was clear in the past couple of years when I encountered you that you were very enthusiastic about this topic, and it was also very clear that this topic was associated with you. And now in front of us, there's the result of your research. And I really liked your presentation, especially in the wild aspect. I have a question about the research methodology of Chapter 3. Because you're making use of observations, you do interviews, and you have different stakeholders in the triad, and then you focus on the relationships between, you also presented that in your introduction, relationships between these stakeholders, between the frontline employees, the residents, and then what is the role of the robot. So what I was missing a bit, and maybe you can comment on that, was the effects on the communication between residents themselves. So residents, the communication between residents and what is going on is changing because there is an intruder, indeed, as you mentioned it. But, and also there's an effect on the communication between the staff, between the FLEs. So could you comment a little bit on these two effects and what that would mean for these interrelationships?
Absolutely. Highly esteemed opponent, I thank you for your question. In regards to Chapter 3, going into this study, it is a high-risk situation. It is a healthcare situation, so understandably, the interview process was guided towards the care staff. However, they did give a lot of information as to how Hero-Chan did affect the interactions between the residents and then also the other employees. Now, in terms of the residents, Meep was identified as the most successful use case due to her stage of dementia. Indeed, it wasn't suitable to other residents, admittedly. However, in terms of the interactions between resident to resident, what was really beautiful is that it gave Meep the opportunity to actually engage with them. So walking past, there would be very much asking, oh, is this your newborn child? And it gave her moments of lucidity to actually engage with other residents, basically. In terms of the resident to staff connection there, indeed, it was an incredibly beautiful moment to see how affected the staff were with Hero-Chan in use. It was quite beautiful. But then in terms of the staff and the interactions between them, what I also observed was that community sense of well-being, that camaraderie that they had between themselves was also enhanced because the robot was able to provide a connection point and bring Meep back into that family unit that they had. I hope this answers your question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
The position will be continued by the member of Assessment Committee, Dr. Sarah Laura-Verels, Professor of Marketing and Strategy from Maastricht University.
Thank you. Dear candidate, dear Chelsea, first of all, I would like to take the opportunity to congratulate you. I've read your thesis with great interest and pleasure. It not only addresses an important and timely topic, but it also makes significant contributions to the field of service robots. You've done a great job and you should be very, very proud of yourself, so congratulations with that. Of course, I also have a question. And my question relates to another important and timely topic, that is person centricity. As you may know, person centricity refers to being responsive to the unique wishes and needs of people, and healthcare organizations are currently trying to embrace person centricity and to actually transform from a more disease-centric approach to a person-centric approach. You also mentioned this in your first chapter, the importance of person centricity within healthcare. So my question is, do you think that service robots are a curse or a blessing for person centricity in healthcare?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you so much for your question and thank you for your commendations on the quality of my work. In regards to person centricity and in the healthcare setting, as I said in my thesis as well, it's incredibly important. The care staff during the time again and again really iterated the need to deeply know their resident, so much so that often the family will present them a book showcasing the life that they've had prior to them living in the residential care facility. And again, it's paramount for the care staff to uphold that standard. I basically see the use of technology and service robots not necessarily as a burden or like a solution for person-centered care, but as a tool. I ultimately think we design for ourselves, we design for humans first and foremost, and that absolutely needs to be prioritized, and that the tool of a service robot really aids in achieving that goal, essentially. And so often, I'll give an example of Meep, who clearly I love very dearly. But obviously the care staff were able to see the effects that Hiro-chan had on her in terms of calming her down. She typically would walk around very stressed around the ward. Understandably, she doesn't know where she is. She doesn't recognize the people there. And what Hiro-chan was able to do was to sit her down and provide a point to relax. She would soothe the baby and talk to other people. And what the staff soon realized is that application of Hiro-chan could actually be applied to when she was experiencing night terrors at night. And they could then give her Hiro-chan, she would be soothing the baby and fall to sleep with that. And so it's in that kind of example where I see that we certainly do not replace humans in the delivery of human-centered care or personal centricity. However, it can be used to enhance our approach to upholding that standard in the healthcare system. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
We continue the opposition with guest in the virtual space, the member of the assessment committee, Professor Dr. Jenny van Doorn, Professor of Service Marketing from University Groningen. Jenny, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Dear candidate, first of all, very sorry I couldn't be there in person because there was some conflicting travel schedules in the family. My husband is now in Barcelona. But I'm happy to be able to join virtually. And I want to congratulate you on an ambitious thesis on a very timely and relevant topic. And you clearly make a novel contribution to literature. And what I really like is also this robots in the wild notion, because I think that's something where we really all need to do some more research. I'm also seeing that you already managed to publish 3 of your chapters. This is great because it means that you're not only able to set up and conduct research, but also to complete the sometimes painful path to publication. But yes, if you do research on robots in the wild, you know already how painstaking research can be. I have a question on chapter 4. I really like the setup that you did with multi-methods, and I also really like the notion of looking at the extent to which a robot can be perceived as an intrusion, because this is also what I hear from people in healthcare working with robots. However, when I look at your quantitative study number 2, that focuses more on the second research question, which is the allocation strategies to myself, colleague, or robots, and less on the notion of intrusion, which I found a bit of a pity. And what I would like to do here is brainstorm with you a bit. So how would you set up a quantitative study where you cover this notion of a robot as an intruder more in depth?
Hi, esteemed opponent. Thank you for your question and thank you for your commendations on my thesis. I enjoy the invitation to a brainstorming session with you now. In terms of chapter 4, the quantitative study, study 2, was directly informed from study 1, being the qualitative findings. And in study 1, I very much had a very exploratory approach where I did indeed want to understand how the intrusion challenge was facilitated. From those interviews, it was observed that these task allocation strategies was a really more prominent part of the research findings, and then that warranted additional exploration there. Now, as with researching service robots in the wild, or anything in the wild really, we know that collaboration is incredibly important, and that also involves collaboration with businesses and meeting them where they are. So in terms of this, we had the opportunity to conduct these confirmatory surveys with the staff members. These were short surveys that they could complete during their shift as desired by the organisation. And so admittedly, I wanted to explore this intrusion challenge more, but then the parameters of the research context did restrict me in terms of the task allocation strategies. If I were to perform another quantitative survey, I would hope that there would be access to more individuals with more time, obviously. That would help immensely to increase the richness of the findings. I would also think to use perhaps more questions targeted to the fulfillment they receive and the relationship in regards to that. I think it's really interesting the kind of escapism they've referred to in the intrusion challenge, so that is not necessarily a bad thing, and I would want the sequential study to focus on that aspect of the intrusion challenge. I hope this answers your question and begins.
And how would you set up
brainstorming.
such a study?
Yes, so I would re-engage with the organisation at a tangible level. Now they've opened even more restaurants, per se. The original study involved me directly catching trains at midnight to Eindhoven, to Kerkrade, in order to get this information. And I would look at more theory in terms of perhaps even appraisal theory, understanding what their initial reaction is in the moment, essentially.
And how would you try to get at this notion of intrusion? So would you use measures, or would you confront them with a scenario? What would you do?
Okay. Yes, now I understand more of your question. I think I would honestly probably return to qualitative studies to understand these key moments more of this intrusion challenge and link it to the Gallup Share Care Wellbeing Index that's been confirmed by the Prolinsky ICOP scale, essentially, and include a lot more items as to how to explore those specific wellbeing impacts, essentially. And I would incorporate a more job demands model perspective as well to try and link those exact links between what they do in their day and how it contributes to their wellbeing, and those scenarios being more focused on concrete instances they experience in the intrusion challenge.
And do you see intrusion then more as an IV or more as a mediator?
Sorry, can you please repeat that?
Do you see intrusion more as an independent variable or more as a mediator of the effect?
I would see it as more of a mediator.
Okay.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you for the brainstorm session.
Enjoyed it.
All right, back from the virtual space to the Ola. Next in the opposition is Professor of Financial Services of this house, Lisa Bruggen.
Dear candidate, dear Chelsea, congratulations to you, but also to your supervisory team for this highly relevant, very interesting dissertation. It's not only dissertation with high societal impact, it makes an academic contribution as well. I also really enjoyed your different research design. And also talking about design, the design of the dissertation as such, of course, I had expected nothing else, still remembering the beautiful banners and design you made for our Frontiers in Service conference, but it's very impressive that you also master those skills. Now, to my question, and I actually would first like to ask your paranymphs for support and ask them if they could please read out your proposition number 3.
Proposition number 3. Evelies are innately social creatures that crave and seek meaningful human interaction.
Thank you very much. So my question centers around this proposition. Maybe a little side note also on FLEs, and I was even wondering when the pro-rector read the title whether he fully understood what FLEs were. You only really define it on page 16, and when you actually Google it, the first 3 hits are Fast Lane English, Fright Line Europe, and French language schools. But of course, I, given my background, had a clue what you were talking about, and you also explained it quite nicely later on. Well, propositions are either true or false, right? That's a little bit the idea. And I guess you put the proposition out there because you think it's true. And I want to challenge you and argue that it's false. But I'm happy to hear your arguments against my point. But if we look at this proposition, you say that FLEs are innately social creatures. I think I would still agree to that because that's biologically deeply rooted. But then you continue and you say that they crave and seek meaningful human interactions. And at a basic level, I would also agree that people in general seek meaningful human interactions, but you really put this into a work context, right? You're talking about FLEs, not humans in general. And because these meaningful human interactions could also be, you know, at home or privately, but you really make the point implicitly that it's really in the work context. Mm-hmm. You don't necessarily specify, it could also be between employees, but implicitly I also assume that it's towards patients or towards customers that you're proposing that. And this is what I stumbled upon, actually having worked as a frontline service employee myself for many years when I was still young and during my studies also. And it was a very different context, fast food. And from what I recall, there was definitely not such a strong desire among most colleagues to really form this very meaningful human interactions with customers, as you described them also in your defense now so beautifully with the robot in this dementia care facility. And so that made me think to which extent context really matters. I was thinking the context that you study, especially in chapter 3, is different on many dimensions compared to other contexts, right? It could be a certain self-selection into these type of jobs. It could be the job demands, what's inherent really to care, but it could also be the job training or the job processes at play. So, and what these characteristics really imply for the introduction of service robots in this context, for example, versus other contexts. And that could be within care, where there are a lot of different care contexts as well, right? But also completely different contexts. So that's essentially the question, the role of a context. And if you agree that that matters, how can proposition 3 then still be correct?
Hello, esteemed opponent. Thank you for your question and your commendations on my thesis. Indeed, context is so important. The proposition is in reference to chapter 3, which is in the aged care context. And indeed, I observed there that the human connection in that care it's paramount. They engage in incredibly emotional work, and they often described, you know, you can't just leave work at the aged care facility. They may have experienced a touching moment that they reflect on in their personal life in that kind of situation. In comparing it to the fast food context that you described in your first job, indeed that context does constitute different levels and types of interactions. You know, in Data 1 they described not wanting to talk to customers. Some people even admitted that they don't love interacting with people in general. However, what pervaded in this kind of setting is when they looked at well-being and how the interactions in their work environment affected them, they very much viewed it through a balanced lens, meaning that sometimes they experienced a deficit almost in their social well-being, therefore they were needing a little bit more to kind of get them through their shift. And understandably, if you're perhaps more introverted, I can understand it doesn't take that much more. And likewise, some describe it that if they had too much social interaction, they would need to kind of step away from that environment, essentially. Now, I still think that the proposition does stand true in that we are incredibly social creatures. The role of context is incredibly important. It's heterogeneous. Goes back to Lovelock in 1980, and it is incredibly heterogeneous. However, what my findings suggest is that very much these employees are in control of how they wish to interact with this social world. I very much believe that the default is that we crave social interaction. Maybe it is more in our personal life than our professional life. However, what I noted is that the service robots are able to really regulate how much they engage in that social world. Mm-hmm. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it answers the question, but then implicitly I also hear you saying that maybe the proposition should be slightly rewritten so that it captures what you just said a little bit better, because now you don't talk about context or the specific context as such, right?
Yeah,
Would you agree to that?
Yeah, so the proposition was very much focused on output of the third chapter, which is a highly social environment where nurses, psychologists, care staff really iterated that they crave this social connection in their delivery. And, you know, that is probably why they also went into this kind of career where they do receive that. So in reflection of the research context being in aged care and the types of employees who would engaged in that social manner, I feel that the value proposition is quite supported considering that context.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We are progressing so quickly, and thanks to Lisa, even I do understand now the title of the thesis. So it's very good that I didn't read like flow well-being or something like that. Anyways, after the joke, let's continue the opposition. The opposition is continued with Professor of Customer Experience Management, our guest from Vrije University, Amsterdam, Mirella Kleinen.
Dear candidate, do I dare say welcome to your future? What an exciting journey you've been on, and yet it's also the first day of an exciting new future for you. I've read your dissertation with great interest, excitement even. It's a topic that I truly believe is going to change our world dramatically in the years to come. And your investigation is thorough, using different perspectives, and most impressively set in a real-life situation, presenting us with well-validated insights from practice, or, as you call them, the wild. Of course, that said, I do have some questions. One of my questions is related to one of your other propositions, on chapter 2, where you state that the ability to adapt is what differentiates frontline employees from service robots when working in the frontline service environments. You provide an illustrative example of the robot arm designed to pour drinks, but not clean up spilled drinks. While there's something that could also be designed, or you could adjust the robot to also be able to clean up those drinks, I believe that the larger issue that you argue for is that robots are not able to respond to deviations from routinized events. In other words, they lack problem-solving abilities for unforeseen events. Yet, I would argue that's simply the current state of technology, and that's about to change very rapidly. For example, we are going to see the launch of the new generation of AI soon, Project Strawberry, you might have heard of, which is designed to do exactly this, problem solving. So it seems a matter of time before your statement will become outdated. And do you agree with that? And if so, what would be the distinctive capabilities of the frontline employees, based on insights gained throughout your PhD? Or is this profession under threat at all?
Hello, esteemed opponent. Thank you so much for your question. You present a very interesting perspective looking at how I've identified that the FLE has this ability to problem solve, anticipate these kind of issues, and really be able to deviate with these service failures to provide a solution. The service robot scape is an exciting one. It feels like every other week there's a new article, there's a new type of service robot. Honestly, it's sometimes hard to keep up in that way. I really much hold the perspective that our view of how fast technology will change and how impactful it is can be a bit distorted sometimes. In that I recall maybe, 10 years ago, 3D printers kind of became all the hype. Oh my gosh, we're going to 3D print everything, all these medical devices. That was worried about weapons, that kind of stuff. But there was a huge kind of lag in terms of it having that impact that we almost feared. When it comes to even ChatGPT, we've seen a very kind of transformative experience there, if you will, where that has really sped up how we perform our job, how we interact with each other in that kind of way. I agree with you that, indeed, as service robots become more complex and more capable of investigating these scenarios where problem solving is required, that they will probably be able to do so in the future. When this is, I'm uncertain. However, I think looking at other technologies, such as ChatGPT, what I perceive is that humans are in the driver's seat in that way. They very much problem solve which applications they should apply technology to what. Indeed, I identified the different roles that service robots may take in terms of like deferring and providing different functions for them. I see that very much for FLEs will determine in what ways and in what situations perhaps service robots should problem solve that situation and what situations maybe not. So for instance, in the aged care setting, perhaps they're able to problem solve dispensing of medicine or that kind of thing, but would they be able to problem solve in a surgery room? Let's hope not at this stage. And as the case with Data One, they often described having to navigate, these robots would navigate around each other basically, but they weren't capable of navigating around a customer who suddenly pushed their chair out. And so what I see in the future is that indeed employees will still have obviously the dominant ability to problem solve over the service robots, but as service robots become more complex and adapt that ability, the collaboration and meaningful collaboration between the technology and the employee will increase. I hope this answers your question.
Yeah, so the way you position that seems very much like the robots are still, like you also said in your presentation and to some other questions, they are a tool and are an extension of the frontline employee. Would you say there are also specific capabilities that the service robot has then that would distinct them, make them more distinct from the employee in time, where they each serve different purposes rather than just an extension of?
Yes, absolutely. So in the Data One context is a fantastic example. When I was talking to the staff there, they were mentioning that the robot was able to sing Happy Birthday and that the customers would request that and the staff would become incredibly embarrassed. But what they did say is, thank goodness I didn't have to sing them Happy Birthday in front of everyone here. It's a very loud experience, very embarrassing for them. And so I see in that kind of light, perhaps as service robots are able to complete these tasks and problem solve situations that the employees don't want to or don't feel comfortable doing so, that collaboration will increase there.
I think I should invite you to Pasta y Basta in Amsterdam, but for now, thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. We continue the position with a professor of nursing sciences from across the river from FHML, Maastricht University, Professor Dr. Sandra Zwaghalen.
Thank you. Well, dear candidate, first of all, also on behalf of me, congratulations to you and the team. You made a lot of an enormous effort and a beautiful thesis, and I think I really enjoyed reading the thesis and especially appreciated your field work in 2 different areas and bridging that gap, and it was extremely valuable. And I also think you're a pioneer in an understudied area, so congratulations on that. And of course, I read it also from a nursing perspective with a background as a nurse. So I will have some questions for you about that. And first of all, so my questions relate to chapter 3 and 4 especially. First, I would start with, in chapter 3, you expressed or you showed some positive aspects. You revealed some positive aspects on people with dementia in practice and their relation, especially with the caregiver. And what I know from various studies, and I also see in practice, that as after a while with different kinds of social robotics or service robots, that although they confirm these positive relational aspects, they still disappear in a storage room or a closet after a while. And that's that illustrates your paradox, I think, in a way. But it's also, I would like to elaborate a bit more on that with you, because there's obviously an implementation problem with this. And I wondered if, based on your results of your studies, you saw barriers of facilitators that you can take into account in the future implementation. And perhaps you can elaborate a bit on what needs to be done to get this implemented in practice well. And then we continue. First things first.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your question. I wish to focus in answering your question on chapter 3, which is the aged care context. In regards to the barriers and facilitators of implementing a social robot at a pragmatic level, the context of Chapter 3 was in an aged care facility in the region, and during this pilot study we very much did need to unpack how do we introduce Hiro-chan to the staff at the facility. We were, you could say, outsiders. We were these researchers from the university, and we're coming in with this social robot and telling them that they should use it in their activities when ourselves and also them know that they know best when it comes to caring for their residents, essentially. And so what we deemed was really important was to actually have that introductory workshop with them, where we could sit them down and really walk through with them, what are your fears? What do you think is going to happen? Do you think it's going to work? And it's not necessarily to preempt issues in the future, but it is to kind of keep them open-minded about what is possible for this application. For instance, during the interview workshop, the common conversation was, it has no face, it's not going to work. Because as you know, doll therapy is used extensively for those experiencing dementia, and it was very impressive to see the amount of dolls throughout the ward. Indeed, the nurses expressed concerns that because it had a face, it wasn't going to work, but immediately they were very open-minded as to the application. In terms of the barriers, I think what managers should really focus on is designing with the employees what these social robots and integration of social robots looks like. Indeed, during this introduction workshop, we had one individual in particular who was incredibly oppositional to the fact that we were bringing this social robot in and then we're going to give it to the person. She was very much, I refused to give any information, sat there, crossed with the arms and everything, and didn't want to engage at all. She sat there.
Sounds like a nurse.
Sorry. Love that. Yes, she did a nurse, and it wasn't, it was a common kind of conversation amongst the ward that this person detested the fact that she would have to be near this thing. But it was only until she saw Meep with Hiro-chan that she completely shifted. She was the one posting in the group chats, look at her, how she's interacting with her and everything. And so while I very much believe that we need to be really conscious of how we introduce service robots or social robots to employees who must use them, there is also this aspect of time, letting them experience Hiro-chan or social robots, letting them simply witness it in action and not necessarily forcing it from a managerial level onto them. And so then while that's navigating barriers, a facilitator is also that you do need your champions in that ward, really advocating for that use. And then over time and keeping an ear to the ground, but letting the employees really determine its most effective use improves their openness to the technology.
So involvement from scratch and especially having champions, I hear you say these are two elements that needs to be included in future implementation. If I have a bit more time, then I would like to ask you another question, and that relates also to the transferability of findings, because what struck me and what I was a bit surprised about was the fact that, and you also presented it in your presentation, that in Chapter 4 you find that robotics are used to avoid kind of difficult customers or difficult situations. And I was wondering if you think this would also be the case in dementia care. And let me explain why. Because often people with dementia, and you may have experienced this, display challenging behavior, which means they may be aggressive, they may be at least anxious. That's also what you mentioned, fearful. And these are often our difficult customers in a way. Yeah. So, and I was wondering if, if you would apply this, or if this would be transferable, these findings, to also long-term care, if this robotics would be used to avoid difficult customers. That would mean, from a nursing perspective, that you would cover up a problem and not recover a patient or add to recovery. And in terms of nursing, nursing is not a task. Nursing is a profession in which you try to assist to gain partly or full independence. And by acting or providing someone with a social robot, you may also not recover but cover up a problem and not go into these unmet needs, you would say. I would like you to respond to that, so just take it into consideration. What do you think about this?
Yes, no, and thank you for describing the experience of a nurse. Obviously, I'm from a services background and haven't had a lot of experience personally in dementia care, so I really value you sharing that experience as well. It's indeed an interesting notion if a nurse would use Hero Chan, for instance, to avoid a difficult interaction. I certainly can't discount that possibility. I think what was important during the pilot study was that Hero Chan was definitely introduced at a group level. It was a group tool that could be distributed about the ward. During the interview process, we conducted one with the welfare care coordinator, who obviously coordinates all the nurses and healthcare professionals. And during that interview, he highlighted a benefit of Hero Chan in the future, being that they could possibly avoid having to give medications to calm residents in a very agitated state, which I had not even considered that was a possibility, that the benefit of that is kind of keeping them in a routine, not requiring intervention, then becoming more stressed perhaps and having to take these medications. And that again, it could be used as a tool to supplement already existing things available to comfort patients. I think, this also does beg the bigger question. We are humans at the end of the day. We do have emotional needs. You can't simply pacify someone with a social robot. They at the end of the day, they indeed do need that human connection, that human touch, reflecting on their personal experience there. My hope is that as these kind of tools become more widespread, that it is still viewed as something that is a caregiving tool, not as a way to replace any activity that is taken, as nurses' roles are all-encompassing and very precious to those receiving their care.
Thank you. Thank you for your valuable answers. I give the word.
Thank you. Well, warming up is finished, and time permits actually to open the second round of opposition. May I ask Professor Lemming to start the second round?
Sure, thank you, Pro-Rector. I would like to have a little discussion about the future then, and the role of physical robots in the next decade or the next years. Because already, in other words, has been asked by Professor Kleinen, but I would like to sketch you a situation, and I would like to have your opinion about that. Because it's not only, isn't it too limited to focus only on the physical robot? Because the environment is more than only the robot, and the robot can capture more intelligence, more AI, of course, and then it will change the relationship with employees, but also with in a healthcare setting, the residents. But there's more. It's not only these two entities in the room, but there's also a lot of intelligence out there, like, for instance, temperatures, CO2 levels, different systems that monitor the behavior of individual patients. So, and it's basically an interplay of all these systems that is at stake. And what is then the contribution still in the next years of the physical robot? Isn't it dominated also by other systems except the humans in the room?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. I really enjoyed this kind of future perspective. I indeed see physical robots as a part of a bigger system, as you were kind of inferring there, and one of those technologies is known as ambient intelligence. Ambient intelligence is a broader system where multiple devices are connected to that system and they operate in unison, essentially. So when we talk about ambient, think, for instance, this room. Perhaps they notice people coming in, the lights go on. Perhaps it adjusts the temperature if it's getting too hot. And it's that kind of system and approach that I see physical service robots in the future taking, where indeed it operates not as a sole entity, but as a larger organism in that way. indeed, this would probably set to change the relationship. Perhaps in the future, as service robots are complemented by other technologies, the role would not be as dominant as it is now. But I do see that in the future, a physical robot would be part of a broader system of technology. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks.
May I ask Professor Van Doorn to continue the opposition? Jenny, do you hear us?
Sure, happy to do so. Yes. Hi, Chelsea. Sorry, I have another question on chapter 4. That was a chapter that really triggered my thinking, I have to say. And I find the differences that you find between the work allocation to doing it myself, allocating it to a colleague, or allocating it to a robot, I find it rather intriguing. So I would interpret this as that people try to do everything to avoid extra work for a colleague. So they rather do it themselves, or they rather give it to a robot. And to me, that begs the question, what's the underlying mechanism? Do I feel more guilty if I give it to a colleague, or is it fairness, or is it something else? Could you maybe brainstorm with me again a bit on that?
Invitation to brainstorm away. Yes, I think ultimately, indeed colleagues don't want to burden their employees, not in terms of increasing their workload, but almost as a sense of pride and ability to complete their job. Perhaps, they would be perceived as asking a colleague to take it to the table because they're kind of scared of the customer. Perhaps they would fear, oh, don't you think you're confident enough, or don't you think you're capable of carrying this many trays? And so I very much see it, yes, there might be a burdening aspect for sure. However, I think there's also the sense of pride and competency in one's role that they may fear be threatened. Even if it is a simple, fast food, casual role, I don't think you want to be perceived as the weakest link in a broader team. And I think that is like a mechanism determining if they would engage with that colleague for assistance.
So it's more like self-presentation concerns than concern for the colleagues.
I really think it's about the certain degree of image and being a competent member of the team that is able to contribute and not burden, and wanting that presentation to be upheld.
Okay, fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you. May I ask Professor Kleinen to continue?
So I'm going to continue on the same chapter. You might notice we're all very intrigued by this. And it relates a little bit also to what came up in your previous answer, as well as one of the examples that you gave in your presentation where you nicely illustrated the lady kicking the robot. So keep that in mind when I ask you this question, because I was intrigued by the model with the Intrusion challenge, and also the fact, if you look at innovation studies, which this basically is, and I've done a lot of work on that, and what I typically see in that literature is we have a very positivistic approach. And I would say that holds a little bit for you as well. So we are all seeking for what makes it a success. But actually, a lot of innovations fail. And even the ones that become successful over time have a lot of failures in between. And when I was looking at these different dimensions that you identify, I was kind of surprised to see that you don't really identify resistance very explicitly. And you mentioned just already an example of that. So to clarify, people often resist innovations using different coping strategies. Typically, they might postpone. They just refuse to adopt it. And that could be the customer as well as the employee. They might outright reject and say, I'll have nothing to do with that, which is difficult to overcome because once the decision is made, people don't like to come back on them, or they really actively oppose it. So they sabotage it, or they boycott even, for example, the use of the robots. So, and we had a little hint on that already, but are you recognizing these strategies after all? Did you simply not look for them, or are robots just not resistant in these cases?
Yes, thank you for your question. The approach of my research really took was challenging the information systems approach, which is a technology acceptance model. And I really wanted to iterate that human centricity is very important in considering service robot use.
Dear candidate, you may actually answer or sketch the answer on this question, and then we stop.
Thank you very much. My research took a human-centric approach and really wanted to understand beyond if someone outright rejected or accepted technology, noting that the human experience involves diverse moments more than acceptance or rejection.
Thank you very much. Dear candidate, dear Chelsea Phillips, the time appointed for defending your thesis is passed, and the degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of the thesis and the quality of this defense. I request that you and your company, friends, colleagues, await the results of this deliberation in this room. Thank you.
All right.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
Long road to the south side. 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. The line, I know you know that I can't read your mind. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose, bad branch, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part cause we're taking off. Get the mileage, traveling so far from home. Gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. It's a better future than we go for. And even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you've won the battle once you've grown. South side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile.
Chelsea Phillips, the degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and the quality of your defense. In view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of a doctor. Professor Oudekerke Schröder is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom, and I invite Gabi, your supervisor, to now take the floor.
All right, please.
Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
Yes, I promise.
By the authority vested in us by law, and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Chelsea May Phillips, the degree of doctor, and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. And as evidence of this, I now present you with the big degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary, and the other members of the committee, and affixed with this official seal of the university. Dear Dr. Phillips, yes, Chelsea, you have officially conquered your Maastricht PhD. No more hurdles, no more uncertainties. Congratulations. And you are the very, very first candidate to graduate from the double PhD program between Maastricht University and Queensland University of Technology, QUT, in Brisbane, Australia. What an incredible milestone, especially given the fact that 3 more candidates in this program are present here today. You have paved the way so impressively that even the robots in your research might be jealous. And here's to your groundbreaking achievement and to many more adventures ahead. And one of the unique aspects of your journey is that you had a supervisory team of 4. Here in Maastricht, Professor Dominic Ma, and I had the pleasure of guiding you from Maastricht, so the 2 of us. And we are truly honored that Professor Rebecca Russell-Bennett and Dr. Kate Leathern traveled all the way from Australia to be here in person today. Please join me in giving them a big round of applause for that. Just arrived yesterday night and looking so bright and shiny this morning. Rebecca and I came up with this idea of a double PhD just before COVID hit, and now we are celebrating our first graduate. And it's been a real pleasure working with you as a team, and I'm confident that our collaboration will continue. And therefore the speech that Dominic and I are giving today is on behalf of the 4 of us. As you've navigated this challenging journey, the support from your parents, siblings and friends down under who are watching us on live stream and who are incredibly proud of you today, as well as all the people here present, your Netherlands family, your Maastricht family, has been absolutely crucial. They have played a huge role in your success throughout your studies. So congratulations to all of you. Service Robots is in the Wild is the title of your PhD dissertation, as you extremely successfully presented and defended. And over this past hour, we've delved into this fascinating research on real robots in real service environments. But now let's talk about your journey into the wild. For almost 2 years, you've been living 16,000 kilometers away from home, bravely tackling life outside your hometown for the very first time, basically becoming an expat. So let's take a moment to reflect on your adventure as a rookie expat, navigating the wilds of a new country. You arrived in early November 22. And right after you touched down, we had this brilliant idea of introducing you to the Maastricht Center of Robots with a little adventure. A field trip to a robot restaurant in Leusden, in the middle of the country. And we thought, what better way to meet your new peers than with some robot waiters? So we got you onto a Dutch train, had a joyful evening with your first encounter with robots in the wild, and then, on the way back, your jet lag finally caught up with you. You were out like a light. Understandably so, considering the whirlwind those first few days must have been. And your PhD twin, Mark, who is also on this double PhD adventure and is serving as your paranymph today, along with all our PhD candidates at the School of Business and Economics, did their best to help you navigate this new culture and way of working. You came from an academic background full of structure, clear guidance, and while you quickly realized that the Maastricht way is a bit more, let's say, organic, with plenty of uncertainties and a lot less hierarchy. In other words, welcome to the wild world of Maastricht, where we like to keep you on your toes. And coming from a country where you could easily read signs, chat with the cashier at the supermarket and laugh at inside jokes, you suddenly found yourself in a place where you didn't speak the language. And as if that wasn't enough, here the dialect changes every 5 kilometers. This led to some funny misunderstandings, a few moments of feeling a bit out of the loop, and of course picking the wrong items at the supermarket more than once. Your approach to tackling these challenges was to dive headfirst into Dutch culture, a strategy we truly admire. Just to give you a taste of Chelsea's dedication, she enrolled in Dutch language classes, signed up for art classes like pottery, and thank you for those of you joining her today. And she registered for the Nijmegen Vierdaagse, blissfully unaware of what she was getting herself into. Luckily, she found a wonderful Dutch host family, and also a big thank you for you being here today, because despite the tough challenge, you powered through 40 kilometers every day for 4 days, having initially thought it was just 40 kilometers spread over 4 days. And your efforts paid off, earning you a military medal of honor. And this ultimate Dutch experience left quite an impression, so much so that you decided to do it all over again this year, staying with the same host family and earning your second medal, one for each PhD, as you joked. And along the way, you even started to appreciate the Dutch music that kept your spirits high on that long walk. And being in the heart of Europe gave you plenty of chances to travel into the wild. And travel you did. We recently counted all your adventures, and you've visited 15.5 countries in 22 months, with Switzerland on the way. And we should probably clarify the 0.5 country for some of our audience members. So one time, Chelsea hopped on a train to the city center of Copenhagen, capital of Denmark, only to end up, by accident, in Sweden. So you touched foot in Sweden. And you embarked on several solo trips, made new friends in hostels, and enjoyed visits from family and friends exploring Europe with you. And I totally get your quest for sunshine. It's no surprise you picked Mediterranean destinations during our dreary fall and winter. After all, both of us felt a bit sun-deprived during those rainy spells. And we also admired your relentless determination to collect data in the wild. And you turned out to be a great stakeholder manager in doing all of that. Not being fluent in Dutch? No problem. In fact, it sometimes worked to your advantage, allowing you to make insightful observations, like watching aged care residents at Severgram interact with your robot hero, as we just learned. You didn't let disappointing response rates get you down either. Instead, you took matters into your own hands, heading to Datawan stores in various Dutch cities to chat with employees at the end of the shift. And something that did not become clear during this presentation, but we also had the opportunity to create a living lab with our very own Maastricht University library. And due to planning issues, it's not yet included in your dissertation, but it will be out soon there. And thank you also for being present here today. You guided us through the wild world of privacy and technical challenges that come with field studies. And your passion for qualitative research is truly impressive. No wonder your Maastricht peers call you cool girly. And it's something you should absolutely be proud of, Chelsea. And now it's my pleasure to hand over to you, Dominic.
Thank you. It's rules. I think you encounter the rules. I would like indeed to add a couple of things, and indeed, I couldn't agree more, with what Gabi said, and I think on behalf of the entire supervisory team. We are not only proud, we are really impressed by all that you have mastered. And I met you in 2016 at the very first visit, also at SSF, and your passion for research, for education, your friendliness, but also your dry Australian humor, made a lot of fun to work with you. But as a PhD, and most of the PhDs are a little bit like some roller coasters. They actually start going up, maybe not super fast, but going up and up. You learn a lot. And then comes all those twists and turns, and takes it. And you also did that twist and turns, and then goes very quickly at some point, rushing almost to the end, arriving at the top. And you did that too. Some of the twists and turns I would like to point out. One, because they all led to challenges but also learnings. One is, I think you can almost write a chapter about Chelsea and bikes. So one of the stories that I recall is also one of the bikes. The first time that you rode a bike, also that you actually were afraid. Of going on a bike because you were surrounded by all those Dutch people that were actually so much almost born on bikes. So you actually pushed your bike in the beginning through that city. Then more recently, I think you realized that their swap fits has maybe different regulations and has different catering to the regulations of more Dutch heights than others. Yeah. And all this you mastered, you overcome those challenges. Another challenge, and we actually dealt with it, was the quantitative research. Right? So for quite some time you you like the qualitative research, you're excellent in qualitative research. I learned a lot, in that process. The quantitative research took some time, you tried to push it away and try to formulate the research question differently. But even there, once we had this unique data set, this opportunity to collect employee data, which is totally rare with Datavan for robots, you got yourself, the resources together, and you mastered that You might never become the, let's say, marketing modeler, or it will not be your life passion, but you master that is all. And last, I think the biggest challenge, however, was the few past months. It was really a true test on your resilience, and maybe tougher than the PhD to some extent itself. So you overcame all the problems with accrediting your honors degree, managing the small prints on the title page, and preparing for the defense. And I witnessed, I have to admit, some of the difficulties only secondhand, because I was actually in Australia, far away. So, and you worked so hard on your dissertation, and many thanks also for Gabi to maneuver all the bureaucracy and all the approval process going from one to another. And also I think this emotional support that put it all again together and was necessary. So I think that was very helpful for that process. And a huge thanks goes also to our PhD office, doing a fantastic job here in trying to help us at here, but also at QUT, and keeping the spirits high. And then when everything was seemed ready, committee prepared, everybody invited, dissertation printed, very nice. A final test of your sense of international humor arrived. A certain someone who shall remain nameless appeared in your office with the news. Sorry, Chelsea, but there has been a mistake. You actually have a different assessment chair and committee. While that, it might not have seemed funny for you at that moment, it was not funny. Now it is, maybe. But again, you overcame that and you mastered that. So you truly made it. The PhD is there because you mastered all that challenges and all that turn. So please let it sink in. Celebrate. On behalf of us, we will celebrate together. And yes, you are a powerhouse, I mean, for us to work with you and walk that path together and enjoy it. And after the PhD, everything is just a walk in the park. Thanks.
Thank you, Gabi. Thank you, Dominique. Dear Dr. Phillips, also on behalf of Maastricht University, I congratulate you with this achievement, with the doctoral degree. And with this, I close this academic ceremony. I love this job. Well, there are few announcements.